the sensors were able to pick up heart rate variability. And is that how we know when heart attacks occur now, or something is happening? Is it the heart rate variability, the one that gives some sort of indication something's wrong?
There's a lot of things that go into that. I would say early research has been showing that basically lowered heart rate variability, you're right, is a very good indicator of a heart attack or cardiac event. Now, specifically, there's lots of different cardiac events, and turns out, like you're sort of getting, why can we see heart rate variability now? That's a really good question. It's really the granularity of these sensors, and I can talk about sort of why it's a ring and why, how we focused on that, because there's a lot of key details in there that are pretty technical, but would be love to dive into. I think you can train these data sets on anything. So if you can actually get that raw pulse waveform, you can start comparing that raw pulse waveform to an EKG, and then start looking at EKGs of, hey, what do people that have AFib look like? Well, what do people who look like, some congestive heart failure look like before that event? And you can start to train, and, we even showed this with COVID. What do people who look like they're getting, who've gotten sick look like? What are all their, what is that pulse waveform data and your temperature data and all the things we derive from our respiratory rate, heart rate variability look like for this subset of people? And you can train these data sets. You can train these models against, reference data.
And sleep became a driving force for you raising money, I understand, in the last round, or just the product evolving. I saw that also with our investment in Calm.
Yeah.
When they went, they owned meditation, but they also then started to own the sleep portion of that. Tell me about, the impact sleep has had, and also the anxiety produced during the pandemic. And for many people, not all, obviously, some people were thrilled. But Trump's presidency here in the United States caused a lot of anxiety, caused a lot of insomnia, and so did the pandemic. So I'm curious, during your tenure, did you see those things manifest in the aggregate data of Oura's data set? You must be able to have seen when the pandemic and the shutdowns occurred, many sleepless nights. Tell us about what you saw in the aggregate data. Obviously, you're not looking at individuals.
Totally, yeah. So being able to see, de-identified data, no one's name attached to it, but across the whole database.
Sure.
Very interesting things. I think counterintuitively, when the pandemic started, for sure, but we actually published this on our blog, The Pulse, where we actually showed that as the pandemic went on, after a couple months, people were actually getting more consistent patterns, right? So they're actually sleeping better for most people. Now, some people obviously were not. Now,
wait a second. Yeah, I think through that theory. Why would people be sleeping better in a pandemic? I think
less variation. You're not going out.
You're not going to work. You're not going to dinner. You're not going out drinking and partying and going to the movies or something like that. You're leading a more sedentary, isolated lifestyle.
Yeah, consistent. Right?
Consistency. So more sleep, perhaps even more sleep. I was doom scrolling till 4 a.m. God, I look back at my pandemic was a complete mania. Now that I look
we
back
definitely saw that with a subset of
I'm in that subset of does not go to sleep, keep scrolling Twitter and looking at COVID stats.
Now we're
trying to figure it out.
we should look at it again. And in the election, I want to get back to, because we actually showed their collective, loss of sleep to the U.S. On that. But on what's happening now, we actually haven't gone through it lately. We should probably do it as it's now dragged on for over a year. I'd bet probably most are probably like you now. You were describing yourself early on. Like, as this is dragged on, people are getting pent up. People want to get out. And so I think, after this much isolation, I wouldn't be surprised if people's data has changed. But it's a good something good and topical to do now. What we did see during the election, we actually published this on our blog too, and we showed that I think the average American got 45 minutes of less sleep that night. So you start to multiply out 300 million people.
People are not going to be, people are not going to be, when people say it's not going to be a productive day at the office, they're right.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, look, I think we saw fascinating data, and getting back to sleep, really this idea of readiness. I think, when Oura was launched at the launch festival, right? No wearables were really doing sleep, right? Fitbit hadn't launched sleep. Apple now does time in bed, but they don't really do sleep. They don't do sleep stages. They don't do even heart rate variability consistently throughout the day or night. But, at the time, no one was really doing sleep. So it was just steps, and just active heart rate was sort of the thing. Like, how high can you get your heart rate, or, when you're running? Just like chest straps. And I think for us, the approach was like, hey, sleep's this whole other area of your life. And by the way, 99.9% of people, even the investment bankers, will try to sleep tonight. But only 10% of the US is actually going to work out today. And maybe 15 to 20% will work out this week. Now 40% pay for gym memberships, or pre-COVID we're paying. But sleep is a consistent thing you do. It has an immediate impact on how you perform and feel physically, mentally, emotionally the next day. And frankly, if you look at it as a country or as a society globally, we're getting less sleep. Probably
Why are we getting less sleep? Is it just it's the devices? It's got to be people taking their iPhones and doom scrolling and playing that last game of threes, or listening to that last podcast.
Or, Netflix, right? Netflix used to say their biggest enemy was sleep, right?
Yeah, you're right. You know what, man? Binge watching is killing people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally, people will start thinking about binge watching like they do social media. Like it's almost like the new cigarettes. You must get sleep to be ready for the next day.
It's worse than, I think it's worse than cigarettes. Lack of sleep has been shown to early onset of Alzheimer's in particular. Great research out there showing less deep sleep is leading to the early onset of Alzheimer's. If you get 4 hours of sleep, basically your glycemic response, your insulin levels are going to be nearly, 50% as worse.
So you get fat.
You get fat. So actually the hormone
That's what was happening to you when you became a fat
investment banker.
Banker. It was because of lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And there's no way to diet or exercise out of that if if your body is physiologically just not processing food
the
properly.
hunger thing and insulin response. So I'm actually more interested on I thought this was fascinating. So you have two hormones really that control your hunger and then how full you are. So ghrelin, determines sort of how hungry you feel. Leptin is determining actually how full you feel after. So if you get 4 hours versus 8 hours of sleep, your ghrelin levels double and your leptin levels go down by half. So you're going to crave twice as much food and you're going to feel half as full, right? So your body's training you. It's like, why would you? We're the only species on Earth. Matt Walker says it's such a good point. Only species on Earth that deprives themselves of sleep. And so your body is like, hey, you're trying to kill me, or something's trying to hunt me. I'm like, so I need to eat a lot of food, right? Like you're going through this fight or flight response. Ah,
that's fascinating. Yeah, if you're not sleeping, it's like get more food in the system because it's probably evolutionarily that you're being chased by a tiger or a pack, another village that wants to kill your village or something.
It was that cheetah. He's still chasing us. That was in the room earlier.